Hello children, let's quickly revise the story The Address by Marga Minko. As you remember, it was a post-war story where the narrator comes to terms with her past and decides to go on a fresh innings, a new lease of life. Let's quickly revise the facts of the story. The narrator goes to a certain address, 46 Marconi Street, with the hope that she will recover some of her things which her mother had given away to this lady, Mrs. Darling, to keep till the war was over, to keep safely because they feared that they would be attacked as Jews. Now Mrs. Darling, this German lady, had been very cunning and she had agreed to keep the things by suggesting them herself to the narrator's mother, and narrator's mother, being the gullible lady she was, had gradually handed over all her precious things to this lady. But now this Mrs. Darling refuses to even recognize the girl, the narrator, whose mother had given her everything. She does not recognize her at all, but the girl recognizes her because she is wearing her mother's cardigan. That signifies that the lady had been using all the things in the house because she had thought that the rightful owner, the mother and the daughter, both had perished in the war. But she was very much surprised, confounded to see the girl, and her immediate reaction was to refuse recognition. The narrator then goes back, thinks over it and wants to again try to get the things. So she goes to the address again and there she meets the daughter. Now the daughter of this lady, Mrs. Darling, she allows the girl inside. She even offers her tea because she is a young innocent child and probably she is not aware of all that had happened earlier. So now the narrator comes face to face with her mother's things. The bed, the tablecloth, the cutlery, the pictures on the walls, the crockery, the teacups, and she is very, very disturbed. In fact, she feels that the things have been oddly put here and there and they are not at all now her mother's things. She feels that by putting them in such an oppressive atmosphere, the lady has finished the ties that she had with her mother's things, and then she thinks that if she wants to go on in life, she has to let go of the old memories, and as such the things have lost their relevance, their importance, their significance, because they are now being used by someone else. The memories that she associated with those things have now been revitalated, wiped away, and new memories are now associated, and those memories are the little girls. So she also thinks practically that she will not be able to accommodate all such paraphernalia in her limited space that she now lives in, and she thinks that she should forget the address, and she decides forever to forget the address and move on. Now you might face these kind of questions, the short answer questions like a straight question. Why did the narrator take such a long time to visit Mrs. Darling? It is clearly written in the narrative that she was grasping with many things, the practical things after the war, and also she did not have the courage to go back to her hometown to the same address and see her things again because they brought back many memories which she wanted to avoid. But then she had the courage and she summoned up the courage to go to that place. And also, how did she feel when she saw her mother's things? Now she does not tell you how she felt, but her reaction is very clear. She felt oppressed, she felt depressed in a way, and she wanted to run away from the things. She did not want to see those memories being faded and new memories being associated. She didn't feel the connect with the things that she had hoped. This you have to write. Now another question, why did the narrator decide to forget the address? This is a thematic question. In a short answer question, you have to directly come to the final point that she finally went to the house, saw those things and was depressed. She felt weak, oppressed, and she felt nauseated and she wanted to forget the memories. She wanted to go on, and she decided that if she wanted to go on, she had to take a new way. So she had to forget the old addresses and the things, and she also realized practically that she did not have the space to keep those things. This is how you have to write it. Now you might also get a character based question on Mrs. Darling or the narrator, as there are only two main characters in the story. Mrs. Darling was, first when you describe a character in a short answer question, one line should describe your the person's physical description, if at all it is given in the chapter. Like Mrs. Darling was a broad-shouldered woman. Then what had happened? Briefly, she had convinced her friend, the narrator's mother, to hand over all the things so that she could keep them safe, and then she was mean and cunning because she had used all those things, hoping and presupposing that they won't come back for the things because they were killed in the war. So that also shows that she didn't have any concern because she didn't even go and check whether the girl survived or not. This is how you have to write the characters. Now, in the long question, there is a thematic question. War only leaves scars. Justify. Here you have to describe the 3 stages of the chapter. 3 phases in which the chapter has been told, the narrative has been told to you, the story. First is how the girl and the mother were living alone in the war. Probably they had lost their father. It is not described how they lost the father. And then they were feeling isolated in that Jewish community, being Jewish in that community, they were feeling threatened by the Germans. So she entrusted her things with a neighbor, and how she was very credulous, and she did not understand that she will be robbed of her things. Now you have to tell about in the second stanza, in the second paragraph, you have to describe how the girl was again isolated because she lost her mother in the war. She was left all alone. She had to go back to her own house, see the things destroyed, and see her mother's things which were meant to be preserved, which were meant to be safe kept, being used by another family. So she was also again isolated. Also you have to mention how she was cramped for space. She lived in a bigger house and had a good life, luxurious life, but then she was cramped for space and she wanted to start a new life. So, and even when she goes back, the third stage will be when she goes back to get her things, she is not able to relate with those things. So these are scars and isolation, that is the result of war. Then again in the long question, if you face a long question regarding the forgetting the address, why did the narrator decide to forget the address, you have to mention the whole background, introduce the narrator, what had happened, how they had given their things away to Mrs. Darling to be kept in safekeeping, and how they the mother lost their life, and how the girl lost her home, and she decides to come back for her things, maybe planning to make a fresh start with her mother's things, but she realizes that they are no more her things. Those things have lost their relevance, the significance, and then she decides that if she had to move on, she has to forget the old memories and start a new inning in life.